All right, folks. Welcome to another edition of XenTegra's Webinar Wednesdays. I got a double header today, if you can believe that. I got two topics that I wanted to cover before the 4th of July. And, I said, why not? Let's do a double header. So this morning, I got a great topic. It's going to be focused on Microsoft WVD, and I got a great panel of guests to talk about lessons learned from the field. And then later on this afternoon at 1 o'clock, I got an overview on Azure NetApp files. So you definitely want to partake in that, and you get 2 hours, and why not? All right, so my name is Pete Downing. I am the host and the CMTO of XenTegra. With me, I got a great panel of guests. I got a lot of great guys on the phone that have been in the throes of implementing WVD. We've all been through it together. And with that, I'm going to go around the horn and let each introduce themselves. So first off, Harvey Green, if you want to give yourself an intro.
Sure, I'm Harvey Green, as stated. I am one of the sales engineers here at XenTegra, and I've been here for about 4 years now. I've been in the business of EUC for over 15, longer than I'd like to count. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining.
And Harvey and I are masters at writing SOWs for WVD. So
yeah, that's been fun.
Next up, we got Neil. Neil, if you want to give yourself a quick introduction.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Neil Hoffman with XenTegra, Cloud Solution Architect. I do a lot of work around Azure from an infrastructure side, as well as governance and security and identity management, as well as implementing components of M365. So kind of all over the place in the Microsoft stack, but I have been involved in some WVD deployments as of late, and I was able to learn some lessons and utilize some of my Azure knowledge to help with those projects. So happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Neil. All right, HashMap, our friends from Canada. HashMap, give yourself a quick intro.
Good morning, everybody. HashMap Swanya, Senior Strategic Consultant, focused on end-user computing, and been doing some WVD projects the last couple months. A lot of lessons learned for sure, a lot of surprises, but I think there's going to be a lot of exciting work with Citrix and Microsoft down the road.
Awesome, and thanks for joining, HashMap. Jody, if you want to give yourself a quick intro.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Good morning, everybody. Jody Elkins. I am the president of the Americas region of XenTegra. And that picture that you're seeing on the screen is about 15 years old. So I've got 20, I don't know, more years than I can count, 27 or 28 in the IT industry. About half of that spent on the client side. So I was a CIO for different industries, different organizations, the first part of my career. And the last part of my career has been focused on the channel from a services perspective.
Nice. Thanks for joining, Jody. Bill, if you want to give yourself a quick intro.
Sure, happy to, Pete. Thanks. Bill Sutton, I'm the Director of Consulting Services at XenTegra. In that role, I basically manage our consulting team. I've been in the EUC business or industry for about 22 years now. All of it has been in consulting. I've never been an IT guy with a business. Been involved with WVD projects for the past few months, mostly assisting as well as handling contracts and a lot of the paperwork stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So glad to join everyone today.
And fun fact about Bill, he used to be a CPA. So,
right? Yeah, I won't tell you how many years before I was in IT, I was a CPA, because that would give up my age, which I'm not going to.
Yeah. Well, you're not right? All right, and then last but not least, the bearded wonder.
Thanks, Pete. Hey, my name is Jared Enskow. I'm a consultant here at XenTegra with 15 plus years in the EUC space, and really excited about new technologies coming out like WVD and that sort of thing. So it's exciting time to be in this space and working on these products.
Yeah, no, and thanks for joining us, Jared. And you know what's cool about all the folks on the screen here is I got a long history, a lot of these guys in the industry, and we've all been in and around each other, whether we worked at Citrix together, worked on solutions together. So it's pretty cool to have all these folks on the phone today to talk about WVD. All right, so let's jump in. We are gonna just really quick housekeeping. We are in GoToWebinar. Thanks for those who are returning. I appreciate the week-to-week people who join. And then parallel to that, thanks for all the new folks who are jumping on today. Definitely check out our schedule. I'll put that link up in a second. If you have any questions at all, please put them in the Q&A. And I encourage questions today because we have some, I'll call them seed questions or topics. But if you have questions, you got a panel of experts to help you answer some of these things that you're wondering about Microsoft WVD. So definitely use the Q&A dialogue to your advantage. The other cool thing is that the questions and answers are logged, and I keep an eye on those throughout the session today as well as the panelists as well. So really quick, I like to get the audience involved, so bear with me. We'll do our panel discussion and then we'll end cap it with how do you work with us? So really fun session today, and I might use this as a webinar / podcast seed as well. So if you're interested, please go to XenTegra.com/webinars. We got a lot of great webinars coming up this summer. I call it my summer schedule. A lot of great vendors, a lot of great topics. And again, we have one this afternoon at 1 o'clock, webinar Wednesdays, doubleheader, Azure NetApp files. So the theme today is WVD. So definitely want to join that. Next up, we have our events, XenTegra.com/events. We have a lot of great hands-on workshops, tech workshops, mini workshops, etc. Definitely check those out. A lot of great topics coming up over the next few months. So if you're sitting at home, working from home, and you need some time to fill, why not join one of our events? And then finally, podcasts. Andy, our founder and CEO, and Bill do a great podcast. It's called The Citrix Session. I'll be posting the new episode tomorrow morning, so keep an eye out for that. Again, XenTegra.com/podcasts. And then a new workshop I've been working on, and I'm going to be launching the next one in the next couple days. It's called Nuts, Bolts, and Beers, Technology Unscripted. And the topic, I'm going back and forth. I'm probably going to do them both, but MSIX is going to be one topic, and then I have another fun topic that I'll be pulling out of my sleeve in the next few months. So I try to do one of these once a month, so keep an eye out for those. All right, I like to get my audience involved, so I'm going to ask a few polling questions. Again, these polls are anonymous. You guys can't see each other, and again, the data is completely anonymous. Now, if you're on the web client, you might have to full screen it to provide an answer. I can't fix that. I'm sorry, I don't work for Log Me In. So the first question, very easy question. My enterprise is evaluating or using Azure Infrastructure as a Service. So just Infrastructure as a Service, so the compute, all right? So not Azure AD, not Azure SQL, Azure Infrastructure as a Service. And this plays into WVD. So we'll give this a couple seconds. I like to get at least 50+% involved. So if you guys can take a minute to provide an answer, and we'll go from there. And if you work for XenTegra, welcome. You don't have to provide an answer. And if you work for a vendor, same thing. But we'll give this a couple more seconds. Going once, going twice, and last call for final answers. All right, so we got a lot of no's in this group. So wow. So it's usually it's the other way around. We get a lot of yeses. So we got a lot of no's. So we'll hopefully give you some food for thought on things you got to consider in general with Azure, because a lot of the theme you'll find out today is WVD is actually not the hurdle. The hurdle is typically the nuts and bolts, what I like to say the nuts and bolts of Azure. So we'll talk a lot about that throughout our conversation today. All right, let's talk about Windows Virtual Desktop. And I'm gonna put this poll up, and as you guys are answering, if you are in the currently testing bucket, hopefully some of us on the phone are helping you. And we are having a blast doing it. I personally I'm working on 2. And if you're in the wanna pilot it, let us know, because guess what? July 1st is Microsoft's new fiscal year, which means they're gonna have a lot of cool funding opportunities to try for free WVD. So you won't have to use your own consumption dollars to try it out. So you definitely want to keep an eye out for that. And if you're interested in trying to understand what is WVD, reach out. We can help you understand that. All right, so final call, going once, twice, and last call. All right, so we got a lot of folks currently testing it, so pretty cool. Hopefully you're doing it for free. If you're not, definitely reach out, because we'll tell you why and how you didn't do it for free, and we might be able to help you as you look into the future of piloting it. If you're looking at piloting it, July 1st is a magic date. I can tell you there'll be some new funding opportunities with Azure Azure Anywhere, WVD, etc. And the goal is to not use your own dollars when you're trying a net new product out. All right. So again, great to see the spread here. A lot of no's, but we'll hopefully change that today. All right, and then final question, are you using Office 365? And that plays into indirectly WVD because you do need Azure AD. And in parallel to that, it does make it easier if you're using Office 365. And later on in July, we are going to be having a topic with my friends here from XenTegra. We're going to talk about migration blues, and we're going to talk about where you are in your Office 365 deployments and how we could potentially help. So keep an eye out for that one. Register today if you want, or just wait because let's face it, that's a month out. I don't know what my next week's looks like at this point. So all right, so final call for questions, and boom. All right, so we got an even split. We got a lot of folks online, a lot of folks in the what I like to call the hybrid model or on-prem, and then we have a lot of folks in the a good chunk of folks in the no or currently. Oddly, we have no Chrome today, so I usually get one, but I like when there's no Chrome. It makes it easier. All right, so that's our polls for today. That gives us some good data on what we can reference, and I like to call out some of the data as we go through the day today. All right, if you're not following XenTegra or XenTegra on social media, please do. LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., whatever your flavor is, please do. Also, definitely give the XenTegra YouTube channel a follow. I've been putting up all the webinars we've been doing up there. And also, if you search for go to webinar stage or go to stage, there is a XenTegra channel there. So definitely keep an eye out there. If you're interested in seeing some of the older webinars or topics we covered, they're all up there, minus some of the new ones. So I try to do about a month tail before I let those go into the wild. So definitely subscribe. You definitely give Microsoft a follow. And one of my other favorite guys to follow, just as a quick tip, is a guy named Christian Brinkoff. The guy is one of the smartest guys I know in the industry right now as far as WVD goes. So definitely give him a follow. And he didn't pay me to say that, by the way. So he's just a great guy to follow. This afternoon, we got at 1 o'clock, we're going to be covering Azure NetApp files. So just a quick hour. Definitely recommend joining that. Go over to XenTegra.com/webinars and register if you already haven't. And we are going to jump into the topic right now, which is lessons learned from the field. And before we do, really quick FYI. So yes, if you attend this session in the second session today, we will give you a Grubhub gift card credit. No discovery call. The only thing we ask is you got to provide a business email and show that you actually are a legit person and you actually want, you have a business or you work in IT. All right, so that's the only requirement we have. So if you give us a Gmail or a Yahoo, we may reply back and say, hey, do you have a business email? That's it this time. All right. Now, just a friendly FYI, if you're a returning visitor, the reason why we have to do some of these gates, some of the vendors require us. So if one of my vendors says, hey, I'm going to pay for lunch, they may ask me to do a quick discovery call. So I apologize for those folks who get a little confused, but we do have to meet some criteria when we're giving out free stuff. So just a friendly FYI. But today it's easy. You attend both, you get a credit. Nothing more, nothing less. And we may reply and say, hey, do you got a Gmail or a Yahoo? Instead of Yahoo or Gmail, can you provide us business or a reason why? All right. All right, so we're going to jump in and we're going to start throwing out some questions to the panel. I encourage questions from the audience today. So definitely, if you have a question on what we are talking about, please ask a question. It's going to help us dive deeper or even derail and go right. So the first question is, I'm going to throw it out to the panel, is what are the primary things you need to consider when rolling out Microsoft WVD? And you'll learn there's a theme here as we talk about this, and you'll start seeing a theme as we go through some of these question and answers. So I'm going to throw that out to the panel, and I don't know, maybe call on somebody. So I may say, hey, HashMap, what's one thing we need to consider when rolling out Microsoft WVD?
First thing from my experience is a solid foundation for Azure. So you need to make sure all your Azure components are set up, VPN, storage, understand the Azure subscription you have, some kind of connectivity, either Azure Active Directory or connected back to your on-premises AD, which is required for WVD. That's something you should keep in mind.
Nice. And since we're on the topic of subscriptions, so to the panel, like what do you think is a good recommendation to our audience? So I live in the mantra of, if you're going to be in a pilot, I would say don't use your production subscription, do a separate subscription. But if you're looking to maybe pivot that pilot to actual production, tread lightly, proceed with caution. You can use your production subscription. Any feedback from the folks on the panel? So Neil, I know you've done a couple of these. Any thoughts there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways to skin that cat, and if you already have a production subscription, or up and running, then you potentially could, put your WVD pilot / POC there and segment it off, in its own isolated space, or you could potentially spin up a POC subscription, but you do need to pay attention to all the components that Hash just went through, like the networking and even the connectivity to on-premises, and you need Active Directory, you need Azure AD. So there are several hurdles to get through to build WVD. So you kind of have to weigh out which is going to be more effort, and do you think that this will be something that you're going to want to keep and build upon, in which case you might want to put a little more effort into the planning, so that if you do like it, you can just kind of take it to the next level without having to tear it down and start from scratch.
Yeah. So since we're on the topic of networking, Bill, I know you've spent a lot of time writing some of these SOWs, playing project manager, and I would argue that networking is a critical piece. So share some of the thoughts around networking and what you would advise our audience on from your just experience of the projects.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there that I've run into is with customers anyways is the lack of understanding or the concern about access to Active Directory. Active Directory is obviously, it's critical to the solution. It's required for WVD. So most customers, or many customers that we've done POCs for, don't have a domain controller or Active Directory domain services running in Azure. So then they need to make sure they've got a VPN back to their on-premises site in order to enable access to a domain controller, or even the ability to sync that between on-prem and the cloud or Azure. So that's probably the biggest, from a networking perspective, that's the biggest hurdle we've run into with these projects thus far is the VPN.
Yeah, and then firewall, and again, one of the things
absolutely.
One of the things I'll argue is communication is key. So if you're in a larger organization and you got different teams, you want to make sure all the teams are in sync. And I can't name some of the vendors or some of the clients I'm working with, but I'm working with 2 large clients, and I got to say the communication they have across the teams is what's making their WVD projects very successful. Because obviously in larger orgs, you might have the networking team manage the networking components of Azure, and you may have the AD team manage the AD team. Now, if you're lucky to be a smaller shop, you get to manage everything. So that makes it a little easier. So that's kind of what I've seen. Cool. So and final thoughts from Harvey. I mean, Harvey, any final thoughts on things you need to consider when rolling out WVD? I mean, you spent a lot of time, you and I have spent a lot of time in the pre, but we're very involved with during as well. So any thoughts from your viewpoint?
No, I mean, honestly, I would just echo exactly what everybody's kind of going through right now, is making sure that foundation is in place, and making sure that, when you start going through this, if you are doing this to actually just test it, just kick the tires, just play around, then yeah, do that in a separate subscription. If this is something that is, something you're going to build on and take it into production, then yes, you can use your production subscription, but as Neil pointed out, tread very carefully, tread very lightly, to make sure that you don't cause yourself any other headaches through the process of doing that.
All right, and then Bill, I think I cut you off. I apologize. You have a thought? Or I cut someone off.
People, this is Jody. I'll add something. I think that use case identification is absolutely critical, right? Especially at this stage in the game, understanding what use cases are appropriate, what use cases create more challenges. Because at the end of the day, what you want to be focused on is offering the most value to your user community. and building upon the foundation that you create. This technology is rapidly changing. In a 2-week engagement, we saw 2 significant changes to the platform in 2 weeks as we were rolling out. That will continue to happen. And so it's really important to build the right foundation, provide a good user experience, build upon that as your environment matures, your skills mature, and your user acceptance matures.
Cool. All right, so let's jump to the next topic, and it's kind of plays into this, but what's one hurdle we all have seen when rolling out WVD? And I'm going to kick off with a simple one. I think I won't say the client name, but we were with a client and their networking was the biggest hurdle. And so I always say before you walk into anything Azure, you need to have a sound plan and architecture around your networking. So, everything from, what your VNets are going to look like to what your subnetting is going to look like, what your app security rules are going to look like, all the way out to the edge. And then are you going to do a point-to-point tunnel, like a site-to-site VPN, or are you going to do an express route? And so I would say that's one of the bigger hurdles I've seen when dealing with WVD. And so I'll so what's sorry, I think I was on mute. What is one hurdle we've seen when rolling out WVD? So I'll kick off. I think one of the biggest hurdles I've seen is networking. So networking, is one of those things that I think even before you and Jody, you nailed it, use case as well, right? So use case is great as well. So let's talk about that. So what is one hurdle you've seen? And let's maybe start off with the networking conversation. Any tips from the panel around networking? Anybody that you've seen. So for example, I've seen some folks that have their networking sound, other folks where we have to sometimes go in and try to figure it out for them. So any tips around networking?
Yeah, I'll chime in here. So yeah, definitely, planning and how your Azure virtual networks are going to be set up and connecting to your on-premises network is important. Additionally, a lot of companies have requirements around firewalls and proxies and how web traffic is going to be filtered, and a lot of times they want to funnel that traffic through a firewall that's on premises. So now you're having to tunnel all your traffic from these Azure virtual machines across a VPN and out of a firewall, and then back the same route coming back, and that introduces a lot of latency for end users, as well as potentially introduces issues with the WVD agents that run on these VMs, because the connections are established from the virtual machines outwards. If those are requirements that you have, then latency checks should be done, and or consideration of potentially putting these types of proxy or firewall appliances in Azure, because all of these types of firewalls can be run in Azure, which would remove that extra hop. But of course, that would require more planning and more effort to build out. So
yeah, and I would say, you think it's fair to say that start simple and work your way up. So I always tell clients to say, hey, start simple and get it working, know that it's going to work, and then layer on the complexity. So if you need a firewall, layer that in. If you need to create some app security rules, layer that in, right? I don't know if you guys agree with that, but that's kind of how my mantra is: start simple, work your way up the stack. That way, if you don't have to go backwards, you're like almost like the zero trust approach. We're going the opposite way. Start with it, open. I don't want to say it's wide open, but open. And then let's say, oh, I need to put a firewall on. I'll put a firewall on. Then that way, if it breaks, hey, it's something with my firewall, right? That's how I tackle it. I don't know if you guys agree.
And just add to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd piggyback onto that and just add that it's not just with networking, but overall, people need to see this as an extension of their data center and not necessarily something that is in their data center. And by that I mean you have everything that's located in Azure and in the Azure region that you set up, but as it is an extension of your data center, you have to know and realize that that is not within the same low latency connectivity that you have within your data center. So you have to plan for it as if it is a separate data center and not try to use everything being bound to your current production data center. That could be on-prem or in a colo, or even in a separate Azure region or a separate cloud. I mean, these are totally separate data centers, so you need to treat them as such and not try to tie yourself to using the same data center.
Exactly, yeah, and since we're on the topic of kind of latency, you know, obviously the closer you can be to your end users, the better. So one of the things I do like about WVD is it does give you the flexibility to use, let's say, Azure West, Azure East, etc. But again, to your point, Harvey, we gotta make sure it's architected in a manner that, as Andy likes to say, our CEO, the packages are close to the clients as possible, right? And then they'll have a better user experience. And if you're interested, you know, on the WVD page for Microsoft, they have the experience estimators. Definitely check that out. It will tell you, hey, where's your nearest front door, right? And making sure your user experience is best as possible. So again, Jared, I know you spent a lot of time doing a few deployments, and what's one hurdle you've seen? And I'm going to tee up a little bit. Storage.
Right when I wanted to talk about networking. Yeah. So real quick plug for being prepared with networking. I love exactly what Pete is saying about layering things in. One of the big hurdles that I saw recently was just with networking. What can happen is things like MTU size on different subnets can even cause issues where you're randomly disconnected or that type of thing. So kind of layering in, with the VPNs, making sure you have a good connection into your data center on your primary subnets, and then going from there and adding, if you have a lot of different subnets, VLANs, et cetera, adding them in, slowly layering them in, that really helps. That way when the problem occurs and you can isolate that. So just real quick on networking, yeah, that's a huge thing. From the storage side, I think it's real important to really have a plan when you're going in, where you're going to store different things. If there is storage on-prem that users need access to, that's extremely important. And then understanding how storage works in Azure. Are you going to be using an Azure file blob system? If you are, how are you going to provide security for that? Are you going to do that through Active Directory? There's different keys you might need, or you might have to set up Active Directory accounts to basically act as a almost like a mock file server, if you will, to provide NTFS permissions and that type of thing through Azure. So there's a lot of important things you need to look at there. Also the performance. Are you going to be using, for the most case, everyone would want to use a premium SSD in Azure for performance reasons, but making sure that you have the cost estimators run, that you've actually done the math so you know what that's going to cost for your WVD host versus maybe some of the other components like a domain controller in Active Directory or something like that. So there's a lot of considerations when it comes to storage, and it can be challenging for sure. Christian Brinkhoff, like Pete mentioned before, has some excellent how-to articles on that. If you're interested in doing WVD, you should be, setting up a free account and walking through some of his storage step-by-steps there. That'll give you an idea of what you need to have configured and ready for your deployment.
Yep, and you and I have had some battle scars along with HashMap and Harvey as well. So we kind of know the storage, and it's fitting that we're doing a NetApp session later on today, because Microsoft, believe it or not, actually pitches NetApp more than their own Azure files. So if you can believe that, yes. And the good thing about Azure NetApp files is it is a native service that Microsoft manages. So it actually is a managed Microsoft Azure service, believe it or not. So yes, it's NetApp hardware underneath, but Microsoft owns it and manages some IP on top of it. So really cool. So definitely want to check out that session later today. All right, so final.
Hey Pete, this is Al. I just wanted to add something to what Jared had to say concerning some of the hurdles that we see in the field. Guys, I wasn't on for the intro, but my name is Alan Harthorne. I'm a consultant with XenTegra, and I've been in the end user computing space for just over 10 years. But one of the things I want to go in greater detail on was the issue that Jared referred to concerning registry keys. So we went into an issue where we were having an issue seeing the storage from the image. And that involved basically us making sure that the value for the key or the LM compatibility key was set to 3. So this was something that caused us, a lot of pain because we weren't expecting it, and quite frankly, we were kind of at a standstill. But it's something as simple as that can really, stall your project. So just being aware of things such as that.
Well, that's a great tip, Alan. So thanks, and thanks for jumping on too. I didn't think you were going to be able to make it, so thank you for joining us. So, all right, so let's talk through tips. So, I'll kind of throw it out to each panelist, like one tip to our audience when deploying, and I'll start at the top of the list. So, Bill, what's your one tip you want to give to the audience today?
Can I give 2?
Summarize. Yeah, sure. Give 2.
Well, the first one I've already said, which is making sure you've got Active Directory in the appropriate place to support WVD, the deployment of WVD. And then the other one, which is kind of in somewhat of self-interest, is, from the business side, making sure if you're getting Microsoft funding that you've got all the paperwork dialed in and buttoned up before you get started, because that's important to get funded and to keep things moving properly.
Amen to that. So, all right, Harvey, what's your one tip to the audience?
If you're in an environment where you have to work with multiple teams, if you have, a separate networking team, a separate security team, a separate cloud team, there's lots of segmentation going on in different environments these days. Please, please, please make sure everybody knows what's going on from the beginning. That will make things go a lot smoother for you. Rather than somebody finding out later on down the line that you didn't meet some requirement that you had no idea about, and have to go back and redo or have your project completely stalled because things that need to be there were not there from the beginning.
All right, Alan, what's one tip from you?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Harvey had to say. When you're working with a large enterprise, of course, as you stated earlier, when it's a small shop and you pretty much, have great range on the components and flexibility there, that's great. But when you're dealing with a large shop, I suggest making sure that you have those folks in the session, because it's one thing to have someone else try to translate what you need done and what you're seeing. So for example, if you're having a network issue, of course, you have your network engineer involved, and he can pretty much understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. So just making sure those folks are at the table at the beginning, and if you can keep them linked in throughout the session, that will be a great benefit to you.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that too. The good communication is a beautiful thing. So, all right, HashMap, what's your one tip of the day for WVD?
I guess it's going to be not technical, just understand what WVD has to offer, understand what the concept is, and what's your end goal. Don't just do it because it's a new service. And if you're a Citrix shop or a VMware shop, I would say layer on and add WVD to that picture. Just as from my experience, WVD is not ready enterprise right now as a service alone. So adding Citrix or VMware on top would be recommended from a management and better image management service and whatnot.
Cool. No, I agree with that. And we're going to talk about Citrix and VMware in a second. So we'll table that topic and we'll have fun with that in a minute. So Jared, what's your one tip of the day?
My one tip would be stay up to date on what's going on with WVD. One of the important things I found out when I was spinning up one of my test environments recently was that there were just a bunch of changes 2 days before I did that. So there's a lot of things that were seemingly much easier, but other things that weren't working at all, and it's just because they had done an update. So staying up to date on the changes in WVD is a huge aspect of it, and checking on it. If you got a project coming up on it, you should be looking up articles on a daily basis. And once you get into a project, it's the same thing. You keep up to date on all this stuff, because there are changes, there are things that happen that will, in most cases, make your life much easier. So it's really important to stay up to date on what's going on with WVD and any changes that Microsoft is making behind the scenes in Azure. And other than that, the other thing that I would say is basically look at it not as a way to replicate what you're doing in Azure, but really be kind of open to see how they do things and kind of what your options are when it comes to everything from image management to security to storage. There's a lot of good things out there, but don't try to sort of shoehorn the way you do things into WVD. Kind of understand where they're going with it, and be open to checking that out. That's what I would say. It's my biggest thing is stay up to date and get ready to learn. It's fun.
Nice. Jody, you have a unique perspective. Curious to see what your tip of the day is, because you're more business side, but you also do more. I'd say you get pretty deep in the project management side as well.
Yeah, well, I used to be technical many years ago, so I can talk the talk, but I'm probably the least technical person on this call. But yeah, I think that brings a unique perspective, and my advice would be plan. And
Yep.
and there's multiple pieces to that, right? There's planning, understanding from a use case perspective, and then engaging the right users, user champions to help you with that. There's planning from really think about what's the outcome that you're looking for from a pure business or operational perspective. What is it you're trying to achieve? If you're trying to kick the tires and just get some knowledge, okay, great. Then you can do less planning. But if the goal is to determine if this is a viable solution to deliver a particular service to my users moving forward, then do it the right way. And honestly, my opinion, the only way to do that correctly at this point in time is to engage an experienced partner. That doesn't mean a partner that does Microsoft. It means a partner that is really focused and has been focused on the Azure space. It's a partner that has done WVD deployments from pilot to production. There's very few production environments today, and those that exist are fairly small, and there's very few partners that have that experience. So I would encourage you to work with XenTegra, but if it's not XenTegra, find one that actually has that experience. I think that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then last but not least, Neil.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I like all the comments from the panelists, so I'm going to add a few. First off, I think Bill mentioned Active Directory planning. I want to take it a step further and say I recommend putting domain controllers in Azure in a virtual network. Forget about authenticating over VPN if you can. Just go ahead and put those VMs right in Azure. So treat Azure like an AD site the same way you would do at any of your offices or data centers, right? And put DCs up there, 2 of them, right, in an availability set and all that good stuff. So that's one. Also around planning, just it's been touched on, and I love what I think it was Jared. Don't try to shoehorn your practices you've been doing on premises in the cloud, because the cloud has a lot more agile and flexible ways of doing things. So the best mindset to have is open mindset, right? And come in and understand that there's new, better ways of doing things. It doesn't have to always fit into the way you've been doing them over the past. Also, the planning piece. Azure, when you're deploying IaaS, you're essentially opening up a data center that's publicly accessible to the world. So again, planning around governance, around admin account protections. If you don't have MFA in place, you're crazy for your admin accounts. You have conditional access policies. You have the entire Microsoft Azure AD identity protection stack at your disposal. So use it, right? Don't just leave things kind of open that somebody can guess a password and then control your entire infrastructure. So you want to put a little planning into that. And lastly, I'll give one more tip. When you're spinning up your first image to create your host pools, go ahead and put it in a shared image gallery. And if you're not sure what that is, go ahead and look it up. That will allow you to update the versions of your images when newer versions come out, or when you want to add new apps or patch things without having to tear everything down. You can just use a shared image gallery to maintain newer images. So it's a lot better way of doing things. So that's my other tip.
Nice, nice. And so I'll kind of end cap with a couple tips I've seen, but a lot of great tips there. The final tip I'll give is understand the Lighthouse program. And by that, what I mean, understand the partners who are there, because there's a lot of great partners within the Lighthouse program. So for example, Nerdio is a great partner. Obviously Citrix and VMware are great partners. Liquidware is a great partner from app layering point of view. So understand the ecosystem, because Citrix, or excuse me, Microsoft doesn't have the silver bullet. So for example, monitoring is still technically quote unquote preview. Or if you go into MSIX and app attach, that's still quote unquote preview. So I think HashMap said it earlier, some of these functionalities are not what I would call necessarily enterprise ready, but there are a lot of great partners out there who can augment and play nicely into your WVD strategy. So that's my tip of the day, is understand the great ecosystem partners that are out there today. All right, so the fun topic, let's talk about why Citrix or VMware is still needed. And I'll kind of tee this up and then throw it out to the team. So one of the things I've been seeing is we get in this conversation around, hey, I'm going to run WVD and I'm going to replace my investment in Citrix and or VMware and or both, because you might be using both, one for VDI, one for apps, et cetera. So, and I would say don't go in with that mindset, and hopefully the panel you'll see will expose the why. But the biggest thing I'm going to tee up is I strongly feel in any app project out there, and hopefully Bill will agree, is that your users are the customer, right? And if they don't like the experience, well, guess what? Your project's going to fail. And so why pull the rug out from underneath them and give them a different experience, which, let's face it, we all don't like change. And two, why pull the rug out from underneath them with something that is tried and true, right? And so let's talk about why Citrix is needed, or VMware. And I tee it up with access, the presentation layer, all right? So I'll throw it out to the panel, and I know there's a few folks on the panel that have had experience with, they walk into a customer, they think they just want to go 100% WVD, and then they realize some of the pitfalls. And so I'll throw it out. I think, HashMap, I'll start with you. I know you recently worked on a project, we'll leave the client unnamed, where they kind of had a change of heart. And you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I guess the biggest hurdle, or the biggest reason why you need Citrix or VMware is from management and monitoring. So like I mentioned earlier, for example, WVD vanilla is good, but it's still not enterprise ready. So if somebody wants one dashboard for monitoring, there's nothing available from the WVD right now. So there's third-party tools you can set up, and you can use within Microsoft Azure or leverage Nerdy or something. But with Citrix, you will get Citrix Director that you can monitor the sessions. Or from an image management, MCS can work with WVD, where from vanilla, if you're not in Azure, if you don't know Azure fully, if you automation, scripting, you don't know how to use JSON files, you will have issues managing the environment. So that's why something like Citrix or VMware will help you. If you're already using it, I would recommend leveraging it.
Yeah, and one of the things I like to say is Citrix and VMware, for that matter, they're both awesome control planes for WVD. So Citrix has Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service, so they have their cloud service. And yes, in order to leverage WVD, you need to use the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service. And on the VMware side, they have VMware Horizon Cloud, which basically becomes a control plane on top of WVD as well. Now, one of the benefits is if you're going to use Citrix and or VMware, guess what? You can take advantage of Win10 multi-session, which is a great solution if you're trying to provide a session-based desktop scenario at a lower scale or lower cost, right? So the economies of scale are a lot better with Win10 multi-session. Now, as far as the protocol, I think that's where we're seeing a lot of discrepancies. And I don't want to say it's bad, but let's face it, VMware and Citrix have been at it a long time, Citrix especially. Anybody want to comment on the experience of the remote desktop client versus their friends Citrix and VMware? Is there any comments on that front?
Yeah, sure. So this is Bill. I was going to bring that up if you called on me. That folks have said the protocol wars are over. I don't know that I necessarily completely agree with that thought, but there definitely are advantages to leveraging the BLAST protocol from VMware, or the ICA protocol. Like you said, Citrix has been at this since 1989. They get it. They understand user experience and the ability to leverage locally attached devices to render video locally or remotely. There's just a wealth of things that ICA brings to the table that WVD is still working on, although it's really gotten a lot better.
All right, did we lose Bill or no? Can you guys still hear
I
me?
think we did. I can hear
Yeah,
you.
I hear you. We lost him.
All right, good. I think we lost Bill.
Still here. I just finished my thought.
Nice. All right, so I think one of the other things I focus on, and it comes up a lot, is the whole authentication flow. And yes, Azure AD has some pretty decent authentication flows, but where I'm seeing some complexities is, again, in certain sectors, I won't say the different areas, but with smart cards and things like that. And I think that's another area where Citrix and VMware definitely shine, is they provide that clean front end. They coincidentally both call it a workspace. Actually, all three of them call it a workspace now. And that's, again, where Citrix and VMware are very mature, is in the single sign-on, support for multi-factor authentication, and also SaaS app support. So giving you that SaaS-based scenario as well, so you can mesh not only desktops together and apps, but also SaaS-based applications. And then finally, anybody want to comment? So one of my favorite products in the stack, and a lot of folks will probably laugh, is Citrix Managed Desktops. All right, so if you're a customer today on the phone and you're new to WVD and you're new to Citrix and VMware, and you want an alternative to provide not only a decent, what I like to call the front door, but also a management plane, Citrix Managed Desktop is a great solution for that, and it's at a pretty decent cost factor as well, especially if you're willing to bring your own subscription. Now, the great news with Citrix Managed Desktops is you can literally pay nuts to bolts, top to bottom, Citrix for everything. So you don't even have to have a subscription, which is pretty cool. And that includes the images, that includes the Azure stack, et cetera. You just come to the table and say, hey, here's my credit card, or here's my PO number, because they're not doing credit cards yet, but pretty soon. And you pay Citrix for everything. So pretty cool. So any comments on kind of Citrix Managed Desktops? Or am I the only guy that likes it? All right, so final thoughts from the panels. Any other comments around why Citrix and or VMware, just based on experience, right? Where you've seen the pro or the con, and even if it's a con, and then we can kind of end cap with where the remote desktop client is going, and I'll make some comments there at the very end. So any final comments on why Citrix and or VMware?
This is just from my
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
All right, I'll call on Neil. Neil, go first.
Okay, a couple of things. So great comments so far. Definitely just a management piece. WVD it's still a work in progress. The good news is Microsoft is dumping a ton of resources into it, but it's a moving target, and it's getting there. But the management experience is just not quite there yet. And then the hybrid model, right? Let's say you have a Citrix deployment where you want some resources, in Azure, some on premises, some in AWS, or what have you. WVD must only be in Azure, so you have a more flexibility potentially if you're using non-Azure specific solutions. That is one piece.
Nice. And then HashMap, you had a comment?
I guess from one of my last projects, it's the optimization, HDX optimization for different tool sets. For example, I know Teams, WVD Vanilla has Teams optimization now, but for something like Zoom or Jabber or Cisco WebEx, it's not available from my experience. So having Citrix on top will provide better user experience.
Yeah, I agree. And again, we're not knocking the remote desktop client, but if you go and look at a parity chart, you'll see that VMware and Citrix are very far ahead, because they've been at it a lot longer, especially Citrix, right? And I know Microsoft is working very hard to get what I'll call feature parity with their friends at Citrix and VMware. And you'll start seeing things like support for, obviously Teams. Teams is in preview mode. It does work. It's not on GCC High or GCC yet. And then you'll see support for like smart cards, things like that, start panning out over the next 6 months to 18 months is what I'm being told. So yeah, you definitely want to keep an eye on what I like to call the user experience, and don't discount Citrix and VMware when you're starting to look at WVD. Always keep that on the side, and definitely reach out. We can help you understand where and why you need these two great vendors. So, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to end cap with, if you have a question, feel free to throw a question out there, and give me a second. I'm going to pull someone in really fast. And as we're doing that, ask any questions outside. And I can't, Andy, I can't make you a thing, but I can unmute you. You're unmuted now. So yeah, if you want to make a quick comment.
Yeah, Pete, I was just going to kind of highlight the analogy I use for the WVD versus adding a Citrix or a Microsoft on top of it. It's kind of like going to play golf, right? Sometimes you can, for a certain course, certain par 3 or maybe a short course, you could play with all irons. But if you're going to go to market with a holistic approach of how you tackle all the different groups and your spectrum of groups within the organization, that's where a Citrix or a VMware needs to come into the mix for protocol reasons and others. But I think a great example is playing with a full bag of golf clubs versus taking a couple irons and trying to play a real round of golf. Yeah,
exactly. I like that. So thanks, Andy, for the comment. And Andy is our founder and CEO of XenTegra. So thanks for commenting, Andy. I appreciate it. All right, so any final questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'll definitely keep a tab on that.
And Pete, I did have one more.
Sure.
You asked about CMD a while ago. We had an interesting case recently where a customer who's been kind of kicking the tires on desktop virtualization for, I don't know, roughly 5 or more years, or maybe 10 years that I've known them. And CMD was a way to get them going into a virtual desktop solution for some of their users. I think they feel like eventually they will pull out of that and just run their own Azure desktops using Citrix. But CMD was a way to kind of get the ball moving and get some user wins under their belt after 10 years of toying with the idea.
And I think I know who you're talking about too, and I agree. So cool. So any final questions, plop them in. I got one great question. I'll answer that in a second, Ralph. But before I do, I'd like to give Jody a quick the floor for a second, just to highlight, how does XenTegra and XenTegra work together, and how do we fit together with this whole WVD story? So Jody, just a quick pass of the mic to you to give yourself a quick highlight here.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Pete. So I'll keep this simple so as not to bore everybody. But in XenTegra, we're a 100% services organization that's focused 100% on the channel. So what that means is we only work for and with partners like XenTegra. The easiest way for you to think about it as a customer is just think of XenTegra as a division of XenTegra. You have the same sales rep, you have the same, XenTegra owns your primary relationship, that's who you're engaging with. XenTegra happens to be, in this case, we help a lot around the Microsoft stack. Sometimes we augment their bench, meaning they don't have people available because they're busy. Other areas it might be actual skills. When partners, I was a client for a long time, so I will say this. Any partner that tells you that they can do everything that you need them to do and they can do all that in-house, you should be very suspicious of. And that's why we created our organization, all coming from the client side of the business, is to help partners like XenTegra actually deliver more value to you as the customer.
Sweet, and I love working with you guys, and thanks for all your support over the last few years on Office and Azure. So I look forward to the future working with XenTegra. So if there's any final questions, please put them in the Q&A. There was a great question that came in from Ralph. Do you find that some of your customers formed new cloud teams to better handle workloads and facilitate communication? That's a really good question, Ralph, and I'll kind of tee it up. I haven't seen the formation of a new cloud team. I've seen more of I'll call it a governance committee. So one of the customers I work with, they have what they like to call advisors, and then the advisors they kind of umbrella over all the various organizations. So the bigger the organization that I tend to work with means that they have an AD team, they have a storage team, they have the Azure core team, et cetera. And then they use these advisors to kind of manage and maintain. Think of them as like Uber project managers with a little more technical depth. So I don't know if anybody else has a comment. If someone else wants to jump in, have you guys seen any new cloud teams be formed?
I would say, typically when an organization just starts delving into Azure or public cloud, they'll obviously be using their internal people, right? They're going to hire a bunch of people right away. So the folks that are managing the infrastructure and security, et cetera, on premises would be those leaders. But eventually, when a customer gets significant exposure and infrastructure in the cloud, then they might start having an actual team that only focuses on that once there's actually a full-time job there. So
yeah, exactly. Cool. So really quickly, shout out to XenTegra Connect. That is our MSP division here at XenTegra. The reason why I bring them up is because guess what? We can help you manage and maintain not only your Azure deployments, but help you migrate to new Office 365. We work with our friends over at XenTegra to make this happen. But parallel to that, we can also do what's called Citrix Service CSP. So we can provide an as-a-service offering, not only on top of just Citrix, but Citrix on Azure, CMD on Azure, Citrix Managed Desktop on Azure. So we have a great managed service teams. If you're interested in letting us manage it for you, definitely reach out. We have a great team of not only support staff, but also consultants that can help get this up and running and give you better peace of mind. Parallel to that, I definitely encourage you, if you've been stuck in the mud and you're like, hey, how the heck do I move forward? We have this great tool we call micro assessments. So if you have, you're in the EUC space, you're running VMware, Citrix, we don't care. You give us a call, we give you a free micro assessment on how does your environment look. We give you a great what's called SWOT analysis. Harvey, who's on the phone, does some of these. Randy, who's also one of our other great SEs, does them as well. And we provide you a good laundry list of things to do as far as what you need to consider. And then the good news is it's a way to see how we work. And I call it the XenTegra interview. So you get to see how we work, what our methodologies are. And the best part is it's free. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And I recommend it. If you haven't done an assessment in a while, we come in, it's about 4 hours of your time, and we give you some good food for thought. Now, it's not just locked to EUC. We also do a networking core assessment, and we're building some other cool assessments. So keep an eye out for that. And then finally, hey, are you hiring? If you got jobs and you need help finding staff, let us know. We have our XenTegra staffing division. So definitely reach out if you need help finding quality help. Heck, between the guys on the phone, our networks are huge. So we can find you folks throughout the country if you don't care where they sit. Or right there in your backyard. Between Andy, Jody, and some of the folks on our network's ginormous. So definitely reach out. Renee's great. She has a great team. And on the flip side, if you're looking for a job or you just want to pick our brain, reach out. Between the folks on the phone, we all been there, done that. We've been on the software side. We've been in IT. So if you're definitely looking for a change in career, reach out. We can help you with that as well. So again, as you see here today, before you go out and start spinning up WVD, reach out because we can help you get some free dollars potentially starting in July to help you with your WVD pilot. Just don't go turn it on because guess what? You start spending money and then you got to pay for it out of your own pocket. So why not let someone else pay for it? So reach out, let us know. You'll get an email from myself and or my team. And if you want to follow up and dig deeper on how do you try out WVD and how do you get plugged into some of the guys on the phone, we'll help you get through that process. So with that, I'm going to do one final call for questions. And as we do a final wrap up, I want to say thank you to the panel today for joining us. We had a great panel of guests. I always like having folks on the phone, and it means I don't have to talk as much. And I want to thank the panel and any final thoughts to any of the folks on the phone. And again, I'll pause and if there is and I'll say thank you to Jody and Neil for joining us. I appreciate you guys taking a slot out of your day to jump on our call and sharing the partnership. So thank you for taking time out of your day. And thanks, Bill, for taking time out of your busy day. And thanks to Harvey, HashMap, and Jared, who are our top guys right now deploying WVD. All right, so with that, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see a bulk of you in about an hour. So go have some lunch and join me at top of the hour at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be talking to NetApp and taking you through Azure NetApp files and what that really means. So hope to see some of you in an hour, and if not, I'll hope to see some of you next week. We have a great topics coming up, so definitely check out our schedule, XenTegra.com/webinars. Have a great day, everybody, and as I always say, see you guys on the flip side.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Pete.